today? Please can we get a round of applause for celebrating Black History Month? So thank you for all being here. I mean, I'm amazed that I get to be up here with some wonderful people, let alone to be introducing one of my most favorite people in the world, somebody I'm lucky enough to call a personal friend. But really what tonight is going to be about is having a community conversation. As you can see up here, we've got some people that I absolutely adore and love being involved with, and they are huge community players. So it is my sincere pleasure to introduce somebody that I am so proud of, and that is Iowa Representative Liz Bennett. So give a round of applause.
I'm just going to take this out so that I am not standing in front of Councilwoman Van Horny. How's that? Thank you very much, Councilwoman. As Ashley Van Horny said, I'm Representative Liz Bennett, and I'm a state representative from right here, House District 65 in Cedar Rapids. And I'm incredibly excited to welcome you here today to meet somebody I have a great amount of admiration for. Senator Cory Booker is somebody who has spent his entire career running towards issues that other people run away from. And I think our panel that we're having tonight demonstrates his commitment to tackling those issues. So without further ado, let's welcome Senator Cory Booker.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you. So I'm pretty psyched about the panel we have here, and I know we want to get into a conversation, but I wanted to just jump in really quick and maybe set the tone a little bit and let everybody know how deeply grateful I am that you all are. I'm grateful I am you all are here, and what it means to me to be in this building. I have to say that I've been a student of history for all my life, and my mom was one of those people that when Roots came on in the 70s, she's like, boy, you're not going to watch this till you read the book. I'm like, oh. So that's somebody giving it up for mothers. So I just want you all to know that when I was in that museum with Dale, with a dear friend of mine, and we're sitting at a lunch counter, it brings back to me the truth of who we are as a country. The Civil Rights Movement was not about black rights, it was about American rights. And this idea that we have to remember in this country that all the great strides we've made, I love the ideals of rugged individualism and self-reliance, but rugged individualism didn't get us to the moon. It didn't tear down the walls to voting for women. It didn't beat the Nazis. The things that we've done that we all are proud of in our history have done because we've done them together. And often across racial lines and religious lines and geographic lines, we've committed ourselves to principles that are much bigger than us. And what worries me right now, and what's fired me up, and one of the reasons why I'm running for President of the United States, is because people are really starting to doubt, to be cynical about the ability for our country to solve its problems. And they feel like the forces that are tearing us apart are getting stronger than the bonds that are holding us together. And in fact, we have politicians now that are trying to make us afraid of each other or pit us against each other. Where we have Twitter trolling, trash talking going on that seems to be committing a moral vandalism in many ways against our common ideals of decency and goodness and grace. And I just want to re-establish this idea that here in America, we not only need each other, we are interwoven into a single destiny, whether we want to admit it or not. And that the illusion of separateness is dangerous and destructive when it comes to our abilities to do big things. And as I look around this country, I see so much common pain, opioid crisis. It's killing children in my city and my state as much as it is here in Iowa. The being shackled to fear that if you get sick, you're not going to be able to afford the coverage. People who work full-time jobs and still find themselves with more month at the end of their money than money at the end of the month.
Right.
Children all over this country who live in districts where it's easier to find unleaded gasoline than unleaded water. That we have a nation right now where women who are working every single day, like my friend Natasha Laurel, whose son has asthma, was in the emergency room across the street, and she has to make that decision that so many people have to make, which is, do I stay here and get this paycheck or go into the emergency room where my son is? Because the Congo and Afghanistan and every major nation on the planet has paid family leave, but we don't. Folks who work full-time jobs and not only aren't making ends meet, but aren't saving for retirement. This is all common pain, and I could go on with the list, but what's missing in this sense is us uniting in a sense of common purpose. And so I'm going to get up on this panel, but I want to tell one story, and then I will get up on this panel, and my staff will not make fun of me for talking too long at the beginning. But this is really important to me because of where I just came out of. I believe in us. I believe in what we can accomplish together. I believe that American history is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of the impossible. And so when I was growing up, you have to understand, I had these parents that never gave me any bit of never let my head get too big. I know I graduated from college, graduate school, overseas study, law school. My father looked at me, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give.
That's it. All right.
And my parents made it clear to me because in 1969, the year I was born, my parents were moving to New Jersey, and in the northern suburbs of New Jersey, which had some of the greatest public schools in America, black families couldn't buy homes. Now, it was against the law to steer people away from homes, so what they would do is, my parents would show up and look at a house, they'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry, this house has been taken off the market, I'm so sorry. But it was groups like in this room in front of me right now, in local communities like this one right here, that said, this is the United States of America. We're not going to sit idly by, because the opposite of justice isn't always injustice. It's often apathy, indifference, and inaction. And so a group of activists got together and said, we're going to help this family. So my parents would go look at a house, be told it was sold, and they would send a white couple, volunteers, okay? Like many people in this room, volunteering to address injustice. And my parents would leave, and they would come, and they'd find out the house was still for sale. And on the house I grew up in this amazing small town called Harrington Park, New Jersey, they found out the house was still for sale. And the white couple put a bid on the house, pretending they were my parents. The bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing, the white couple did not show up at the real estate agent's office. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer. And this man, a white man, walked in with my dad. I always imagine that he must have rehearsed this speech all night long, because he walks up with the real estate agent and said, you are in violation of New Jersey fair housing law, federal fair housing, the values of this country. But he didn't get his speech out, because the real estate agent, realizing he had been caught, stands up and punches him in the face. And then sticks a dog on my dad. Now, every time my dad told the story as I was growing up, the dog got bigger. Eventually, I'm a teenager eating my Cheerios, and my dad's like, boy, I had to find a pack of wolves to get you in this house. You better appreciate what you have. And I tell you, we lawyers, community people got involved when we moved into this house. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was president of my class, high school All-American football player. I got into Stanford because of 4.0, 1,600, 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards. And the whole time on that journey, my parents were like, look at where you are. You're not here just because you work hard. Yeah, you do. But you're here because folk who weren't related to you got up and came together. Like they did to build the greatest infrastructure project this nation has ever seen, that ran right through Iowa, called the Underground Railroad. Like they've done on so many chapters of American history. My father wanted me to know I owed a debt, and you couldn't pay it back, you had to pay it forward. Well, I'll tell you what, this is the point I want to end with. I think the most common way we give up our power is not recognizing we have it in the first place. Because there's this frustration I have that, and I do it sometimes. I'm sitting home at night, I get caught in what I call a state of sedentary agitation when I'm watching Rachel. She's getting me all upset about something. And I'm like, somebody should do something about this. But the somebody's me. I learned from a woman on the projects in Newark. I always say I got my BA from Stanford, my PhD on the streets of Newark, and lived in some projects for about 10 years. I still live in that neighborhood now. And she told me that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word.
All right.
And so this is the end of the story that I didn't know until I became a senator, because I went back to find the people that helped me move into that town. I'm a United States Senator now. Dear God, we should say more thank yous in our lives. I never thanked the man who took a punch for my family. And so I go back and I find the head of the Fair Housing Council from the 1960s. She was easy to find because she's still head of the Fair Housing Council today in New Jersey.
All right.
She's 92 years old, Miss Lee Porter. You won't read about her in history books.
Right.
But every day she gets up. Now she doesn't help black families. She helps same-sex couples, Muslim families, Americans with disabilities. Because injustice is injustice no matter who is facing it in our country.
Right.
And I tell her, I gotta find the lawyers. And she sends me to the lawyer, and this is the point. Because I call this guy up, 84-year-old retired New Jersey judge. And I find him, I call him up, I'm Cory Booker, I know who you are. I said, sir, do you know I know what I did for your family. and I'm like, sir, and I thanked him, I asked him all the stories I needed to confirm. It was not a pack of wolves, it was just a dog. He confirmed all the details for me. And then I asked him, this is the point I want to end with. And it brings me back to these folks. And our power. I asked him why. Why would a white guy in the 1960s, at a time that there was real fear of what would happen if blacks moved into neighborhoods and property values might lose, white flight, why, sir, did you take so much time and energy to help black families? And he goes, I know the moment I made the decision. And I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, it was 1965. And I was sitting on the couch watching TV. And this was back when we had 3 stations.
Right.
Somebody here tell me you remember that, at 11 o'clock they go off. It's probably why the birth rate was higher back then. And he said he was watching a TV movie that most of America was watching, because there was only 3 channels. And the movie, I know the movie actually he was watching, Judgment at Nuremberg. And the press, it was breaking news. They cut away from a movie. Now we have breaking news every 5 minutes. Melania has a jacket. But back then, we've gone to a low place, folks. But back then, this was breaking news for something really unbelievable. It broke to Alabama and a bridge called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And there are these marchers coming across this bridge. And he's watching in horror. And you all know the story.
Right.
They stood confronted by Alabama state troopers. And he said he watched as they stood there. And I know the story now because he's my colleague, John Lewis, went to kneel and pray. But he didn't get a chance to pray before they turned around. The Alabama state troopers gassed them, shot gas at them, and then stormed in with billy clubs and viciously beat them. John Lewis humbly said to me, I shed a little bit of blood on that bridge, Cory. And I'm like, no, you had your head cracked open. And this man on a couch in New Jersey is watching what's happened, and he doesn't get caught in that state of sedentary agitation. He doesn't allow his inability to do everything to undermine his determination to do something. He remembers that when it comes to change in America, you got to remember those 10 two-letter words. If it is to be, it is up to me.
Right.
He said, I may not be able to do everything, but I can do the best I can with what I have, where I am. Can't afford a flight to Texas, to Alabama. And so he just got on the phone and just said, okay, I don't have that much time, don't have that much money, but what can I do? And he starts calling around to see if anybody needs some help. And he finds this woman named Miss Lee Porter, and she says, I need lawyers, I need help. And next thing you know, he goes to work. He told me that 4 years passed. and he gets this case file with these two names on it, Cory and Carolyn Booker, my parents. Now think about this chain reaction here. A bunch of folk on a bridge in Alabama standing up for what is patriotism. And what is patriotism? It is love of country, and you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. Now you may not always like them or agree with them, but love means you see their worth, you see their dignity, and if they're under assault, if they're being denied rights, it affects my life.
Right.
And here are these people on this bridge standing up in the name of patriotism, and then instantaneously they release an energy that goes 1,000 miles and changes right away one person's mind on a couch in New Jersey, who then gets up and goes to work and ends up changing the destiny of a generation not yet born. I am here because of that chain reaction. Everybody in this room, we are dissatisfied by the state of health care in this country. We are dissatisfied by a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. We're dissatisfied that public education is under assault. We are dissatisfied that our planet is in peril because this powerful nation refuses to do anything about climate change. We're dissatisfied, but the question isn't the level of our dissatisfaction. The question is how much will we engage in action, we individuals. So I want to say tonight, I'm looking forward to this because I'm on a stage now with some action individuals. And they are folks, this is like Generation Rising here. There was a time I was a young upstart like y'all. But Maz, you're still a young upstart. But I'm very excited that they're up here, and I'm hoping we can have a conversation. And if one of them dares to ask a question from the crowd, you're welcome to do that as well, or respond. But maybe I can start about just going from that theme of getting involved. I know there's a lot of folks here that were told that what they couldn't do, or that they shouldn't run, or maybe that they should wait. What motivated you to get involved? Maybe some of you could tell. Maybe we can go down on the end.
Is this thing on? First of all, how about that? Good evening, everybody. I'm State Senator Zach Walls down in Coralville. I represent Johnson County, Cedar County, and a little part of Nicotine County. I'm really excited to be here, and I heard a lot of echoes in the story from Senator Booker in terms of making a kind of cause and effect and a chain reaction when you're willing to stand up and speak out. Some of you may have seen me on YouTube from a speech that I gave in 2011 in defense of marriage equality back when that was under assault here in our state. And that, for me, was what caused the chain reaction that led to me to decide ultimately to run for the state Senate.
It was very personal to you, Senator.
It was very personal.
And if you haven't seen the speech, you need to go on and see the speech. And you were like, what, 4?
I was 19, but it was, so it was a while ago. And what I think about now is this moment is so important, at least to me, because there were so many people, including a lot of people in this room, who were willing to stand up and fight for families like mine at a time when it wasn't popular and it wasn't easy and it wasn't the law of the land yet. And I just, after the 2016 election, I think like a lot of people, I knew that I had more to do, and that's why I decided to get involved and run for office. That's great.
Well, I don't have a YouTube video or anything, but
I can make one for you right now.
it might help my chances later on. But so I'm Representative Amy Nielsen. I'm from North Liberty, just a little bit south of here. I represent the western and southern parts of Johnson County. And so, yeah, my story kind of started that I saw something that I didn't like happening in my community, and I stood up and just chose to spoke out against it. Which kind of, once you get...
Come on, be more specific. What was it?
Well, okay, so what it was I live in North Liberty, and when I moved in there, I had 3 very small children, but when we bought the house, they said, don't worry, there'll be a new high school here by the time your kids are old enough to go. And we're like, okay, good, because, the high schools are kind of a far drive from North Liberty. It's a good 20, 25 minutes. And we're like, oh, great, this will, we can just stay in North Liberty in our small little town and be good. Well, my kids were about to get to that age, and there started to be talk in the school board that that school was probably not going to happen. There had been some money being diverted from saved dollars that was supposed to be being saved to build that high school, and there was talk about taking that money and using it for other buildings. And I said, no, you can't. If you take that money away now, it's not coming back. We can't let that happen. So, I wasn't alone. There was a lot of parents that stood up and spoke out against that. And last year, Liberty High opened, and it was really great to stand there. Yeah. And say, this is where you can place the blame for me being in office, because that's where I got started, and from there, as they say, you get bit by the bug, and it just grows. And so I kept active in my community, and when the opportunity came to run for mayor of North Liberty, I looked and I saw that there was no one there that looked like me or my friends, and they weren't living the same lives that my friends and I were living. They didn't, they weren't going up and trying to make sure that their kids had schools there in the community to go to. And so I just kind of took a big leap and ran, and was luckily successful, and became the first female mayor of North Liberty in 2014. And from there, then 2 years later, ran for state representative. And I can still see that the representation is not there. I work with Representative Bennett, and I work with a lot of people that don't necessarily represent or look like the people that they're sent there to speak up for, and you can definitely see it in the policies. So it's something that I want to continue to stand up and work for. So that's my
Good evening. I'll try to be quick. Senator Booker said he was going to speak for 10 minutes to kick this thing off.
Stacy, don't sound like my staff now. It's a Baptist 10 minutes.
My name's Stacy Walker. I have the great honor of serving as the Lake County Supervisor for you all here who live in this district. I was born and raised here in Cedar Rapids, and I guess I was kind of bit by the political bug early on in my life, but I was born to a single mother who was not college educated, but was a pretty bright woman and did the best she could to give us the best life that she could. My mother was killed when I was 4 years old, and my sister and I went to live with our grandmother, who was a single parent who had raised 7 kids on her own. She was originally a child of the South, moved here first to Chicago in that second great wave of when a lot of African Americans were leaving the American South and traveling north and westward. And then she came to Iowa, and she was a badass woman. Can I say that?
Definitely say that.
She went to college in her 50s right here, community college at Kirkwood, graduated, demonstrating the value of hard work, persistence in education. And even though we were sort of born on the wrong side of the tracks, raised in the low end, again, she worked hard and gave us a beautiful life. I sat just today, I had a meeting with a person from the community who was adamant about a project. And they were saying, you need to commit taxpayer dollars to this because it's important. It's important. And I said, it's important to you, right? And that's fine, and I got to hear you on that, and I got to weigh your interest against mine. But I came to office to fight for, first off, the people who look like me. Because growing up, there weren't a whole lot of folks in leadership positions. We're still not a whole lot of folks in leadership positions in this community who look like me. But I want their voices to be heard, and I want their interests to have a seat at the table where decisions are made. And secondly, we've got some deep-seated issues we still need to address, and Senator Booker made it clear the only way we are going to meaningfully address those issues is if we find a way to set aside those small things that may divide us and come together around the larger things that unite us. So I've staked my entire young career in politics so far. I was elected in 2016 on that central idea as to how can we improve our communities, how can we lessen these divides between us, and how can we do cool things that will serve as an example for the generations to come. So that's what I'm all about. Anybody who knows me, who listens to me, Yam on TV, that's what I talk about, that's what I get excited about, and I wake up every day going to work to make sure that young kids, young boys and girls have someone to look up to, have someone to model themselves after, and can look forward to a diverse, progressive, growing, awesome community. And that's my MO.
Councilwoman, you're just like a history maker, glass ceiling breaker, name taker. Heartbreaker? No.
My name is Mizahar Saleh. I'm originally from Sudan. I came to this country 20 years ago, looking for a better life. And I came to Iowa City so I can study. That's back in 2011, yeah. And I decided to run because the night of the election, when we elected, well, I did not elect him, President Trump. Yeah. That night we were watching the TV to see the result. You know, interestingly, my kids, the elementary school, I have 5 children, but the 2 younger were sitting with me watching the result until 11. And I said, no, you better go. They said, no, we have to see this. Because if Trump wins, that means we're going back home. I said, we are not going nowhere. Just go and sleep. And they went and slept. In the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, they come and woke me up. And they said, what's the result? I said, I'm sorry, he won. And my son started crying. At that time, he's 7 years old. And he started crying. He said, everybody at the school said, we're going to go home. I said, we are not going home, don't worry. You know, you born here at least, you are not going home, but no one will go home. 3 days later, a friend of mine, she called me, she said her daughter at the high school was high in Iowa City. She was working on the cafeteria. Somebody told her that you better be ready to go home. She's wearing an hijab and she looked like, yeah, she's an immigrant. That's why he told her that. Her mom, she called me. I started calling her. I said, what's going on? She told me the story. She went to the Brinton. We make a big deal. After that, we did a march where 700 people come because we don't like that thing. And also it come on, I guess, New York Times picked it up. It was there on the news. And we said, we are not going to tolerate this. At that moment, I said, no. I want this community to work for my children. If we cannot change the federal level, let us change the here. Change start from the bottom to the top. I just said I have to do this. I was a community organizer, I still am, and I being like working in the community, I made a lot of change in the community. People saw that, and I said, okay, then let me run for city council. I will start with city council, and I will move up. But I said, let's start at the bottom so I can make this community work for me and for my children and for everyone who look like me or any immigrants who came, because this country is for everyone basically. I announced and I run, and as you know, our next president said, you know, people who are not my relative, it's people who elect me. People who don't know me, they did not grow up with me growing up. They just believed in me. And they said that maybe I can make something. That's why they support me. I won by 77% of the vote. To become the first generation immigrant to be on the city council with accent. And also to become the first Sudanese American to win an office in the whole United States.
Whole country. Why'd you sit next to her, man? Why'd you sit next to her? You gotta follow that now.
I think very poorly.
I'm Tyler Olson. I serve on the Cedar Rapids City Council, also a former legislator, and it's really a shot of energy to sit up here with these folks for a couple reasons. One, as we've already heard, and I think we will hear, just inspiring stories of people who looked a really tough situation in the face and said, "Why not me?" and got it done. And so I appreciate hearing those stories and the ones we'll hear. Also, I'm not really that young, but I really appreciate the
Were you born before '69?
well, not
You're
too
young.
long
You're
before.
young.
But my ego's feeling pretty good. I'm gonna go with that. I decided to run for the legislature. Really, it came down to education and public education. I was born and raised here in Cedar Rapids, and really felt like a lot of the opportunities that I had were because of the priority and value that our community and our state placed on public education. When I was young, my dad served on the school board, and I'll tell you that, having watched him go through that, people who serve on school boards are saints. I mean, it is not an easy job. The pay's not real great, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I don't know if we have any school board members out there, but appreciate your work. Thank you. But my dad was so frustrated because a lot of the decisions that they would have liked to make, I think, here on the local level were constrained by state policy. Limits that the state put on what they can spend it on, and he really felt like the quality of education was slipping, and that was a while ago, and I think the last few years we can probably all agree that we're going through that same cycle again, but the state representative who represented my area decided to retire, and I really saw that as an opportunity to jump in on that particular issue and ran, and unlike a few of my former colleagues or peers here, got to serve in the majority with a majority in the Senate and a Democratic governor for 4 years. And those were the glory days. I don't know if you all remember that, but we were able to get a lot of things done. We raised the minimum wage, not high enough and should have indexed it, but raised it. Public education spending, stem cell research. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And it really shows you what we can do with a president who shares our value, with a governor, with a legislature that shares our values. I decided to get involved in the city council. Really, in this building is a great representation of it. We had a massive flood in 2008. The water was, I'm sure, pretty close to the ceiling in this room. The river's just out here behind us. And we really needed flood protection. So it just came down to a basic infrastructure project that I thought our community needed to continue to push forward, work with our partners at the federal government and state government. And so that's why I ran for city council. I think your experience in local government is maybe the same as mine. It's a very practical thing. Streets need to get paved, garbage needs to get picked up, and for us, we needed to build permanent flood protection. And so I ran for city council and just finished our first year and have really enjoyed serving with council member Van Orney and others as well.
So I ran for a lot of different reasons, and I want to be conscious of time. So I'll just say to start out with that this community showed up for me. I came here in 2002. I had great opportunities to work. I was able to work my way through college, first starting at community college and then earning a scholarship to go to Cornell. And really, I tell people I'm kind of from the Nirvana generation. I was very cynical. I didn't really think that politics, that you could do anything with it. I felt like it was pointless, everything like that. But I had a college professor who, one day I kind of expressed these feelings to, and, I think she almost literally did kind of go through the roof. And she said to me, she looked me in the face and she said, "Women your age do not know how hard we worked for the things you take for granted." You do not get in the room where decisions are being made. Other people are going to make them for you, and you're not going to like it. And I thought, Whew, okay. All right, I better do something. And so the biggest issue to me at the time was healthcare. The narrative that I had growing up was, well, you better get through college and get a good job with insurance by the time you're 22. Otherwise, you can get into a car accident and it'll ruin your whole life. And so we were real fans of positive thinking in our house. But that's scary. I was a non-traditional student. I didn't have insurance. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to get off the fence here and I'm going to figure out who I think will actually care about the things that I'm going to go through. So for me, that was then candidate Barack Obama. Now we've all heard the stories of super campaigners, super volunteers. That wasn't me. I was an adult working student. It was an honor just to go make phone calls a couple times. And when I showed up in that caucus room, it blew me away that, oh my gosh, well, here are other people. These people are actually my neighbors, and they feel the same way about things that I do. So that was kind of my first step in. My next big immersion in politics came after, in 2009, the Iowa Supreme Court decided to treat same-sex couples the same as every other couple here in the state of Iowa, and we got marriage equality here. And legislators like Tyler Olson stood strong for that when the attacks came, and people like Zach Walls told their family stories, and I just can't tell you how many tears I cried when you were talking, Zach. It was amazing. But you can imagine that backlash came, and I said to myself, I am not going to sit here and watch this happen. So many years later, that was 2010, 2011, and in 2014, I was elected as the first out LGBTQ woman in the Iowa legislature. Good enough reason for me to run. Earlier I said this community showed up for me. So when I was making the decision to run, really the question was, am I going to show up? Because you know what, a lot of Democrats will stand up for schools, a lot of Democrats will stand up for healthcare. Those are all good things that we believe in. But there are other places where progress needs to be made that people are not going to want to touch those issues. And so I decided that if I ran, I was going to be willing to show up on those issues that other people were afraid to touch, and that's why I ran. So 3 terms later, I'm still here. Take it away.
So I failed to mention before that my name is Ashley Van Orney, and I represent District 5 on Cedar Rapids City Council. I have the pleasure of working with Tyler Olson and my colleague Dale Todd back there, who's the best seatmate ever. And he deserves a round of applause. But my story is a little bit different in the fact that we had good representation in District 5. However, I felt like we needed great, and I didn't feel like we had that. Okay? So my story starts off a little bit differently. 8 years ago, I lost my father. I'm a farmer's daughter, so for me, my life was always planned. I was going to take over the family farm. My dad was within 5 years of retiring himself and transitioning to take it over himself. So I was kind of left with, do I contribute to the brain drain, or do I throw myself all in Iowa? You can see the choice that I made. I threw myself all into Iowa, and I started getting more and more involved. The charity that I kind of chose of choice was representing children in foster care, mainly, like you spoke about earlier, Cory, about just out of gratitude. I had wonderful parents who worked their asses off to give me everything that I possibly could, knowing that they would contribute just as much as long as I was putting in that hard work too. They'd always meet me that way. So out of gratitude, I started giving back to people who deserved everything, just like the great parents that I had, and that was children in foster care. So I was standing in 2016, I was standing watching the first black supervisor for Lynn County get elected. An hour later, the blood just ran out of my face as I watched President Trump take office. And I had to look within myself and say, am I, Ashley Van Orney, am I doing enough? And I knew that I could have done more. I knew that I could have knocked more doors. I knew that I could have gotten out there further. So I decided that it started with me and it started with my community, so I started getting more involved. It wasn't until I was, increasingly working on this issue of children in foster care and how I could support them in my own community that I wasn't getting my emails responded to. I didn't feel like my representative was listening to me or even took the time to answer, just an email back. So I started looking into them. I thought, if you don't want to answer me, I'm going to go to you. So I started looking at what they had to do and realized we deserve better. Every single office, whether it's city legislature, school board, state, federal, everybody deserves great. If you do not have that now, go and get it. Make them be great for you, okay? So in June of 2017, I went to a cousin's wedding in the UK, and I came back and I said, this is it. It's go time. And we fired everything up. And in a matter of months, we had our first election and led the polls then. Didn't quite get over 50+1, but I knocked out the third opponent, and then we went into a runoff campaign and led the polls with the supermajority in December of 2017. So here I am, and I'm so happy to serve you all and work hard. And I've worked with every single one of these people up here, and believe me, it is a pleasure. I have to just take a moment because Zach and Amy have fought so hard and helped talk me through. I don't talk about this often, but I have a trans male brother, and these two have just been amazing, making sure that I can be the big sister that I should be and fight for my brother so that he's got all the rights that he deserves, so that his baby grows up with all the rights that she deserves. And I couldn't be happier to be up here with you all, so thank you.
I'm going to govern our time because we have about half an hour more. A little bit more?
35 minutes.
35 minutes, fantastic. So what I'd love to do now, everybody knows everybody's comfortable, some folks are already raising their hands, is I think we should take a couple more minutes if you guys have some questions for each other or things here about some of the issues going on, because I do think we should try to answer some questions from some folks out there as well. But do you guys have anything, Stacy?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. And I feel so bad that I feel like I'm blocking everybody in this corner over here. So should I just
That's a good
pull back a little bit?
too.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, go ahead, Stacy.
Two questions that I'm going to ask every candidate running for president, and what are we up to, like 3,500 candidates?
It is the state of North Dakota's population, I think.
3,500.
Times two.
I'll start with this one. Every candidate I've ever worked for, every candidate I've voted for, I've either asked this question of or had great expectations of. It's the issue of education, right? And how seriously are we going to take education? And I have these conversations over and over and over again ad nauseum with people who say it's a radical idea to think that we can't get to affordable, universal education in this country. They say the same thing about healthcare, right? It's so radical to think that we could ever get there. And I want to die in a country one day where if you are capable, qualified, you are eager, and you want to get an education, whether it's in the trades, whether it's going through university, whatever it is, that a good society ought to be ready and willing to make that happen. So first question I have is, where are you at on your plan for education for this country? Where would you like to see education go? And at all levels, but I'm particularly interested in higher education. And then my second question is, so you didn't know what you were getting when you...
I did not know that, Stacy.
So, first question, education. Second one, the hardest work that I do is being an elected official of color in a predominantly white community, state, is educating along those racial lines, why things like implicit bias training is important, why it shouldn't be offensive to say things like Black Lives Matter, how that isn't at the exclusion of other places. It's really hard, and it's especially hard if you're the only one talking about it. If you can't find other leaders in the community to also do that, right? It's easier for other folks to be dismissive if you're one of the only voices, right? So how do you plan to lead on those conversations? So education and then Black Lives Matter.
So I'm going to try to go through and dazzle my staff in my brevity on these, but I want to just hit really hard on this because this idea is not a radical idea that we should be the education nation on the planet Earth. By the way, we once led the planet Earth. We were the top educating country on the planet Earth, more college graduates than anyone, and a lot of other metrics, more investment in public education. Now we've been passed on college outcomes, STEM outcomes, early childhood, up and down the education. Other countries are out investing in us in education because they seem to know something that we should be knowing, and knowing it not in our words or our thoughts, but in our realities. And the global knowledge-based society, the most valuable natural resource any country has is no longer cobalt or coal or oil or gas. It is the genius of your children. And genius is equally distributed. There's many geniuses born in South Central as in Beverly Hills. And we have to make sure that we are creating pathways for all of those children to manifest their genius. Now those are really nice words. But what we're doing right now is assaulting public education like we have never seen before since the early days. Teachers are under assault. Schools are under assault. Streams of resources for states to educate at every level are under assault. And so we need to have an honest conversation that those dollars invested in public education actually produce tremendous multiples of return in terms of the productivity of those kids in their future. And they save us resources and save us money. And so the federal government, I believe, has an obligation. When I was a mayor, I acted like a mayor. It was my kids in my city every single day battling. And we transformed our education system. We're the #1 city in America, Newark, where I was mayor, for beat the odds schools, high poverty, high performance, because I was like Malcolm X. By any means necessary, my kids are going to get an education. And we were able to do a lot of very creative things. But when I became a senator, endorsed by both of my state's teachers unions, I began to say, what can I do to help overall the state of New Jersey's education system and the country's to go bigger? So I want to take a step back and just give you a few things that we have to do if we're going to be competitive again globally in the way that we need to be to lead in the 21st century. First and foremost is we've got to stop thinking that education is just about what happens in that school and begin to start recognizing there are a whole lot of things that happen that are interrelated with the education issue. First and foremost, we have the highest maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates of any industrial country. In other words, when that brain is being developed in the second, third trimester, first year, we are not taking care of children and developing that most productive economic unit on the planet Earth. We need to make sure we get back to investing in pregnant women, making sure they have the health care that they need, make sure that they have the OBGYN care they need, and when that child is born, make sure in those very early days we're doing the kind of things to do what every first grade or kindergarten teacher knows. Too many of our children are coming to school already behind before they even get there. Right. And that means doing things that other countries are doing, which is making sure their kids, this is crazy and radical, I know, but have clean air, clean water, and clean environments. Over 1,000 jurisdictions where children have twice the blood lead levels than Flint, Michigan. The asthma rates, #1 reason why kids miss school because of asthma rates, the quality of air that they're breathing. Poverty in and of itself is something that deeply affects only 9 out of every 100 kids that are born at or below the poverty line will go on to college. And so creating environments, common sense solutions. If you're a progressive in this room, you are also a fiscal conservative. Don't let other people take that title away from you. You all know, if you're a progressive in this room, that investing money in early childhood development creates incredible returns. I want us to become the best nation from pregnancy until universal preschool. And that means environment, that means housing, that means health, all the things that create an environment for a kid to succeed. And so let's go through K-12, the things I want to go talk about at length in this campaign, but we need to talk about paying teachers. We raise teacher salaries, especially for teachers who are willing to teach in at-risk environments. Why do we give 25-year-old stockbrokers get better tax treatment than a 55-year-old teacher who reaches in their pocket every single day to buy clothes for their kids, school supplies for their kids, sanitary products for their kids, food for their kids. If the tax system does not reflect our values, we should be giving some significant tax breaks to people willing to teach and helping them out. And schools, the professionals in schools are not just teachers and principals. We all know we need great nurses, mental health care professionals, counselors, and more in our schools, because children are coming to school with a whole sort of interconnected web of challenges that we should be able to help our kids with. But let's get out of school for a second and get on to higher ed, because that's what you talked about. So the crippling debt that's affecting our kids is outrageous. What does it cost to go to school? Look at our competitors and how they're beating us. It costs between 0 and 4% of median income to go to school in Germany. It costs about 6 to 7% of median income in Canada. True tough. In the United States, over 52% of median income just to go to college. And every kind of debt you can refinance, but you cannot refinance student debt. That is outrageous. And guess what? This is what most people don't know, is that the student debt, the federal student debt program, is a profit center for the federal government. We make billions of dollars of profit off the backs of our students. Think about that. Think about, again, that 25-year-old stockbroker who gets carried interest, all these tax breaks, and we are making our students not be able to refinance their loans. We should be focusing on getting to debt-free college and making sure that we are holding our universities and colleges accountable for making sure that they're not raising tuition every time we pump more funds. But this is where I'm going to get in trouble, because if I only say things that people agree with, I'm going to sound like a pandering politician that wants people to caucus for me. And I don't want to get elected the easy way, just telling you things you might agree with. So let me challenge everybody in this room. Most people don't realize that only about 35% of Americans get a college degree. And if we want to talk about a society that wants to try to make some kind of stigma, oh, you don't have a college degree, as if for some reason you're not doing jobs and professions that should be vaunted, should be respected on the same level as a college degree. I'm telling you right now, I've got degrees in sociology, history, political science. In a 21st century economy, what does that qualify me to do? Maybe be a United States Senator? I don't know. We need to start talking about not K through 12 education, from womb to career education. And that means on the jobs of the 21st century, again, I look at our competitors and what they're doing, Switzerland, Germany, we need to start creating the kind of programs and pathways towards being advanced manufacturing, towards the healthcare profession, a lot of these other certifications that you need to do jobs that we're going to need. About 25 to 45% of all the jobs in America right now are going to disappear this century. And a whole new set of jobs demanding a whole new set of skills are going to come about. Will we be prepared to meet the jobs of the 21st century and create pathways for people to get there? We've got to create the best apprenticeship programs, the best training programs, and fund them so people can earn while they learn those pathways. And so I could go on, but I'm stopping there just to talk about race for a second. And if I answer this question well, pledge to everybody that you will shave your head in solidarity.
You got mine, folks.
Thank you. You heard the answer at my last stop. We have a real problem still with race in America. And we've got to start by telling the truth. And if we can't do that, we're not going to heal it. Look, I love our founders. They were imperfect geniuses. And their greatness lies not in their imperfections, but in the fact that they put these principles in the air. But when you refer to Native Americans as savages in your founding documents, when women are not even mentioned at all, they're second-class citizens, and blacks, Stokely Carmichael used to always say, constitute, I can only say 3/5 of the word. But the advances that we've made as a country have been when we've not tried to paper over racial differences, the wretchedness of our past, but when we've had the courage to confront that, to tell the truth about it, to address it, to heal from it. That is what redemption is. That is what reconciliation is. And so I have a tough time, a lot of times, talking about the racial wealth gap in America. You know, that a lot of the programs that created the massive growth in middle class were just straight up denied to African Americans. FHA programs, redlining. I could go through all the policies. The policies that kept my parents almost out of a town where property rates, where property values were growing and the like. You see this the worst place, and I know you know the book, The New Jim Crow. You see this in the worst place in our criminal justice system. And if you think that that doesn't have to do with economics, it does. Because as soon as you have a criminal conviction in this country, and remember, there was more marijuana arrests in 2016 than there were violent crime arrests. Okay, so we're criminalizing people for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents did. Lots of congressmen did. Everybody wants to say legalize marijuana. Well, certain communities you can smoke marijuana and not have to have any worries about getting in trouble. But in America, there's no difference between blacks and whites for using drugs or dealing drugs, but African Americans are about 4 times more likely to be arrested for it. And what does that do when you come out of the system on the other end? And by the way, we have a system that, you know, both the rich and the poor commit crimes, but only the poor do time.
Right.
Think about this for a second. We have a system that Brian Stevenson, my hero, says treats you better if you're rich and guilty than poor and innocent. You want to tell a lot by a society? Look who they imprison and they incarcerate. In Russia, they incarcerate their political opposition. We don't do that, even though they were chanting "Lock her up." In Turkey, they imprison their journalists. Thank God we don't do that, even though they call you guys the enemy of the people. But here in this country, who do we put behind bars? Low-income people, mentally ill. The biggest mental health care facilities in this country are our prisons. We put in the addicted. We treat that disease like it's a crime. People get in and out of prison before they ever can find their way to treatment. And African Americans and Latinos. And when you get out, what happens? The American Bar Association talked about 40,000 collateral consequences. You can't get a job, you can't get a business license, you can't get a loan from the bank. Hello, Iowa, you can't vote. And there's a great study that was done by Villanova University that shows that if our incarceration rates were the same as our industrial peers, we'd have 20% less poverty in America. And race plays a role in this because implicit racial bias, which former FBI directors have talked about, other folks, implicit racial bias is real. African Americans, Latinos, whites caught for the same crime, blacks will get about 20% longer sentences, more likely to get mandatory minimums. I can go on the data. And so the question is how do we solve this? And it's something that anguishes me because I know the goodness of our country. I know that I'm here because blacks and whites in the past and other people in the background were willing to confront the wretchedness and work together to overcome it. And that's why I think that we have to speak our truths from our experiences. But more importantly, we need allies in other communities. This is why, for me, you know, I don't think that only the women in the Senate should be the only ones talking about sexual assault or lack of representation. Why is there only, in the entire Foreign Relations Committee, when we're dealing with planetary issues, is there only one woman on that entire committee? Why should only LGBTQ Americans talk about the fact that our suicide rates amongst our LGBTQ kids is off the charts? Homelessness for LGBTQ kids, about 30% of LGBTQ kids report missing school because of fear. We need to stop being even allies is not enough. We should all be accomplices in helping to create justice for each other. And so I just want to be a leader, whatever title I have, we're all leaders, that speaks truth about what's going on. Not in a way to make people crouch in defensiveness or feel like, oh, are you calling me a racist? No, but to call every American to the call of our country, which is still to be a nation of liberty and justice for all. And the danger to that, is comfort where we don't show what we need to show in this country, which is a far more courageous empathy. Okay, we're going to take some questions from folks, and I can't be the only one answering questions because these are some of the most talented people here, and I want them to answer. Do you have somebody you want to call in? Which gentleman? In the maroon? Oh, you lady? Okay, this young lady.
So I know it's one thing to recognize that we incarcerate the poor rather maybe than the guilty, and I know you did work on the First Step Act, but it's not enough. It's barely touching the surface. So I want to hear tangible changes that you would try to do to our criminal justice system.
So first of all, a bill that I worked on for 5 years is definitely not enough of a step. But I know the numbers, that's going to affect thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Americans. The person I brought to my State of the Union address was a guy who had given a life sentence for less crack cocaine than the weight of a baseball. A life sentence for that. And so the bill we passed is a big step, but it's only a step in a mile journey. And I'm very proud of that. Let me give you an example of something I battled to get in that bill, which is the end of solitary confinement on the federal level, an effective end of solitary confinement. Other countries call that torture. And so we've got to understand that I came from when I became a senator, people told me we couldn't get it done. There was a senator, I don't know if you guys ever heard of him, named Chuck Grassley, that was on the floor talking out against these kind of reforms and these kind of changes. But yet we were able to get a comprehensive bill done. But in addition to that, this is like one of the main reasons I ran for the United States Senate. And so if you look at my legislation, I have a raft of legislation, and even things I didn't get passed made a difference. Let me give you an example. I proposed something called the Dignity Act for women, because I found it insane that when I visited prisons, and we all should visit prisons and jails, and sat down with women in those prisons, they told me horrific stories of having to make their own tampons because they couldn't buy them.
Which I know is in the First Step Act, so I appreciate.
That women tell me stories about the placement of their children was not taken into account, where they themselves were placed, even though all the data shows if your children are able to visit you and see you, your recidivism rates goes down, and the chances of your kids getting in trouble in school and with the police goes down as well. The Dignity Act said, look, over 80% of women who are incarcerated, overwhelmingly nonviolent, are survivors of sexual trauma. People want to talk about the school to prison pipeline, but they don't talk about the sexual trauma to prison pipeline. And so I wrote a comprehensive bill for women in prison, proposed it, didn't get one Republican co-sponsor, but everywhere I could, I'm going on CNN and stuff talking about everything from tampons to trauma-informed care. And guess what happens? One is the BOP changes its regulations first on providing sanitary products. But about a dozen states in America now have picked up my legislation, the Dignity Act, and introduced it into the law in a number of states around this country. And so there's a way to make a difference, even if you don't necessarily win on the federal level, because where are the most prisoners in the United States? Federal prisons or in state prisons? 80% of our prisoners are in state prisons.
Right.
So there's a long way to go, but this is the first time in my lifetime that we've actually stopped the hyper-incarceration. Remember, our prison population has grown 800% on the federal level since 1980 alone. So in my sort of span of lifetime, that legislation we passed was the first time we moved to shrink prison populations, not expand it. And so the other legislation that I have, I'm going to fight for it. If I'm President of the United States, we're going to get a lot of it over the finish line. And this involves a lot of things. So one, my Dignity Act for women. I have a bill for children in incarceration. I have a legislation about private prisons and our need to get rid of them and end private prisons. I don't believe in mandatory minimums. I think judges should be able to do what judges do. We now have a country, most Americans think we have a criminal justice system where we still have trials and juries. It's just not the case. Between 95 and 98% of criminal convictions now are done by plea bargain. There's a great book about why innocent people plead guilty, because when a guy comes in and says, you can get out of jail right now for time served, or I'm going to stack these mandatory minimums and you're going to face 25 years, that's not a bargain. People are pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit. So I invite you to learn. This has been one of the main issues I've been working on as United States Senator. And we have a raft of things to deal with mass incarceration, but it's not just that. It's helping people when they come home. I wrote a bill to help people get jobs, to ban the box, as they call it, to end this idea that when you apply for a job, you have to check a box. It moves that back to the end of the process after you've gotten a conditional offer. It increases the chance that somebody with a criminal conviction gets hired by 60 to 70%. So it's a comprehensive view of making sure everything from policing practices, which with implicit racial bias training, all the way to reentry, to jobs, and God, if I hear conversations about legalizing marijuana that don't include expungement of records. You want to add anything to that? Because I'm putting on the state legislators here. Okay, Mossy, you want to get a question?
I have a question here. I just would, thank you. I would like to ask you what your policy going to be about the sanctuary city. And also the other question is, our ASEAN president, he would like to build a wall for immigrants. What kind of wall would you build for immigrants?
I hate now we often use these labels, and people don't stop and say, well, what exactly are you talking about? So in Newark, I hear right-wing radio, oh, they were a sanctuary city. Well, what were the rules in Newark? They said if you are in our city and you need emergency services, you should get emergency services. If you're in my city and need the help of our basic services, you get the help of our basic services. We're not going to deny your dignity and your citizenship. And it also said that, hey, my police officers need to be able to protect my streets. If we all of a sudden empower ICE, and now my immigrant community is worried that if they go to the police to report a crime, that they now suddenly, their status is going to be in question, and they might be, you know what that's going to happen now? Is that people aren't going to come and report crimes. So my city was just saying, hey, our job is to keep people safe. I was mayor, safe and secure. And I can't do things that are going to undermine the safety, not just of immigrants in my city. If you don't catch that criminal, the next person they rob might be someone who's been here for 20 generations. And so I just think we should, these labels we throw around undermine us getting to the fact that on most of this stuff we share values. We share values. Local police officers should not be ICE agents. They should keep people safe, everybody safe. And then when it comes to immigration, we agree on these issues. The Senate, right before I got there, passed a bipartisan comprehensive bill until the demagoguery and the demonization happened. We don't even look at facts anymore. Where are most of the immigrants coming from? The visa overstay. I can go through the ways that people are getting through, but somehow we have a president that wants to use a State of the Union address yet again to talk about hordes. We're using words that dehumanize people who are coming here for a better life. We've taken away the ability for people to come and present themselves for asylum. How do I know this? It's because I went to the border. I went out on a bridge at midnight. I crossed over the bridge. I walked back over. The agents didn't meet me at the booth. They came out to the middle of the bridge to stop me and start questioning me. I showed my identification, everything, and then I started questioning them. I said, what if I was looking for asylum? What would you do? And then we turn you back around. This was midnight, and the people on the bridge, my Spanish is pretty good, were telling me, it's tan peligroso aquí. No puedes entrar. It's very dangerous over here. Don't go into the city, they were telling me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a 6'3" former tight end for Stanford, and you're turning away, I'm told not to go back there, but yet you're turning away single moms with their children that come to this bridge, escaping violence, and we're not saying that we're going to go through a constructive process for asylum?
Please, Lord, help us.
As soon as I started asking them questions, he said, wait a minute, who are you? And I'm like, I am the United States Senator from the state of New Jersey. That's who I am. And he's like, well, you'll have to speak to our public relations official. I've seen enough already. I've seen enough. Who are we? Who are we? We're better than this. To throw children in cages, to separate families. Come on. Why is this why do we don't think we can keep ourselves safe and secure and affirm our values in this country? And we know the contributions that immigrants make. I don't need to look at a Sudanese woman. I can look at an Italian guy, Irish immigrant, Czech immigrant. Most people, you don't know this. My family's from Iowa. My grandmother was born and raised in Des Moines. My family came here. My family came here. They were immigrants from a far-off land called Alabama. and my grandmother's grandmother had her husband was killed, and she moved up here with her 9 children to go to a town called Buxton.
All right.
And in that town, a coal mining town, immigrants from Eastern Europe and descendants of slaves went down into the mines together side by side.
Yeah.
And they dug with their hands and their tools coal that fueled this whole region. And when somebody died, a miner, the other miners didn't go to the funeral. They went to work that day and gave their earnings to the family. They stitched together quilting bees, blacks and European immigrants together, weaving this country's common destiny together. That's my Iowa history.
Right.
And so I don't like talking about faith. Heck, I'll take a kind atheist over a mean Christian any day. As this Baptist boy from Jersey, weren't we taught about how to greet the stranger?
That's right. That's right.
And so this is the values of our nation, and I'm not going to let demagoguery and fear actually undermine our ultimate safety and our security and our economic well-being. The last data point I'll give, and then we'll go to whoever you tell us to go to. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm trying to get people to caucus for me. Cory didn't call on me. I'll show him. I'm going to caucus for Avenatti. Is he still running? I don't know. So the last point I want to make is this. Since 9/11, before 9/11, we had a corner on biotech research on the planet Earth. We were incredible. Every bright mind on the planet Earth wanted to come here, get degrees in stuff that half of Congress can't spell. I'm one of them, probably. And then the fear of after 9/11 made us change a lot of our immigration laws. And some of those brightest minds, I have my president of my university, Stanford University, is come in my office begging me, saying to me, look, these minds are coming to us, the best biotech researchers on the planet Earth that have probably within them some of the best future businesses or ideas to deal with clean energy in the future. We're just kicking them out of our country. And guess what's happened since 9/11? Biotech research centers from the top 10 have started proliferating in other countries. We're going to lose our competitive advantage because we've always gotten a competitive advantage by the greatness of the workers here and making sure we had pathways for immigration as well. This is a national security issue, this is an economic issue, and this is a moral issue. And we must have immigration policies that work for us. All right, who's next?
We're going to take this gal, but I just want to say, I read a fun fact about you. Just
I'm
the
afraid.
other day. And that's, if Senator Booker becomes our next president, he would be the best football player elected to office since Gerald Ford.
Well, because the older I get, the better I was.
We're going to take a question right here.
I personally have worked in the early childhood education field for 40 years. I'm way before 60 now. But to hear you talk about it without being prompted to talk about it, I just want to thank you. Thank you. An idea of some kind on how you would secure early childhood education that we know sets up lifelong success.
I love that you asked me more specifics for it. And so I just want to say to everybody that the first question I often get when I say something bold, like universal preschool, is that people say, oh, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Or worse, they'll say, oh, an unfunded mandate for states. And so first, I just want everybody to understand that we are indeed the wealthiest country on the planet Earth. And our tax code shows our wealth. Because we give about $800 billion of tax breaks up to the wealthiest in the country every year. And that's through tax loopholes and tax breaks. And I'm going to tell you, I'm one of those people that thought the corporate tax rate used to be was too high too. If you have a small business in this country, God, you're struggling just to get into the black. It's hard. But do we need to bring it down to 21? And because some of the largest corporations have every loophole you can imagine, their effective tax rate often is zero taxes. That's not fair share. You benefit from all the greatness of this country, and you can't pay your fair share. And so if you just raise that corporate tax rate back to 25, and by the way, you can give special, I'm working on a big announcement about small businesses, because we need to get more entrepreneurs in this country chasing after their dreams, and we need to be starting more businesses, and we should have a tax code that incentivizes that. I don't know why GE pays nothing in has paid zero in taxes, established business that benefits from being an American company. So if we just raise it back to 25 or 26, okay, which makes us globally competitive, that could bring in hundreds of billions of dollars. That then we can decide, are we going to use that to lower the deficit? Please remember, the most fiscally responsible presidents in recent history have been Democrats. It's Republicans that keep blowing holes in our budgets. And that's a blanket statement. But we did crazy things under Republican leadership. The first time this country has ever gone to a war and didn't ask for shared sacrifice. My grandparents told me stories. My grandfather worked in the Willow Run bomber plant. My grandmother from Iowa, who married my grandfather, moved to Detroit with her. They had victory gardens and rationing because the country was at war. Now we're in a 17, 18-year war, and we're only asking a small percentage of our population to make all the sacrifices. And by the way, they make all the sacrifices, and then when they come home, they can't get health care. They can't get jobs. So we have the money. It's what are our priorities? And this is the thing I want to say. I could tell you how we're going to pay for it with small little changes to the tax code that would not affect one working class, middle class, small business person in this room, that wouldn't affect the quality of life of the wealthiest people in this country, but yet would do something better. You know this. Dollars invested in early childhood pay off in multiples of that in productivity, the growth of our economy. Everybody would get wealthier. And that's why I have bold ideas also, like child savings accounts. Every child born in America gets a $2,000 deposit in a savings account that's constantly like the earned income tax rate. They get added to every year. By the time, if we just did that alone, by the time they're 18 years old, the lowest income people would have about $50,000 in an account to use to start a business, buy a home, or go to college. And by the way, that's a race-neutral program, but Columbia University just came out and said my bill alone would eviscerate the racial wealth gap. Because now everybody born in America would have some stake in the game, they would have some wealth. So these are ideas that you don't need to, that's an idea you can do, changing the corporate tax rate. You can do it by turning back the estate tax to what it was on the crazy days of President Barack Obama. And by the way, I miss Obama. I miss Obama, and I miss her husband too. Her husband's all right. I miss Obama. Michelle! So we need to start doing what we are. I don't want to be partisan because my goal is, if I'm running for president, is not to beat Republicans, but unite Americans.
That's it.
But I do want to say something. I want progressives to reclaim the fiscally responsible label. We have shown time and time again, when we govern more fiscally responsible because we know something. I'll give you one example about this. We know that the morally right thing to do is also the economically right thing to do. It is morally wrong, as this young lady was here telling me, to throw people in jail for mental health care, for helping them with their drug addictions, or for low-level drug crimes. You devastate economies. But let me give you a better example, because I love data. When I was mayor of my city, I used to always say, because I learned how to govern by the numbers, I used to set up intricate dashboards to see the productivity, transparency, and I used to always say, God we trust, but everybody else bring me data. I want to see the numbers. So let me give you some data about the morally right thing to do being the fiscally conservative thing to do. Homelessness. What is cheaper for society? To let mentally ill homeless people be on the streets or to put them in supportive housing? Now the local leaders here know how expensive supportive housing is. It is very expensive. I'm the mayor. I built supportive housing. And it was during the housing crisis. And I love some of the Motown records. I ain't too proud to beg. Because when they told me I couldn't build stuff, I started going around. I got John Bon Jovi. Listen, these Jersey celebrities, I know you all have heard of them. John Bon Jovi. He does not give love a bad name. Gave us $1 million to do supportive housing with people with HIV and AIDS in Newark. I was going to everybody I could, you know? And we found out a study from Seattle that actually looked at the numbers, the data, comparing the cost to a city of having mentally ill homeless people on the streets versus in supportive housing. It measured the cost of the 23 people that they took in for a year. And they found out those 23 people alone, they saved $1 million to taxpayers. And you all know why. Because where do homeless mentally ill people often end up on the streets? They end up in hospital emergency rooms. My sister there, if I had hair, it'd be your color. They end up, and who said jail? Jail, they end up in our jails. That is so expensive way to treat a problem. But we in this country want to do the backwards things of paying more on the back end, and it makes no sense. Why should women get prenatal care in the emergency room when they're having babies when it's so much more expensive? So I'm looking forward to the debate when some people want to step to me and say, how are you going to pay for these things? Bring that debate to me, please. I will show you practical ways to do this that are fiscally responsible and that are morally right and will build a greater nation in the long term.
Thank you.
All right.
I like you're doing the Oprah thing. I like that. Get me out. Sir, how old are you? 25?
10. No, 11.
You're 11. Right. You're double digits.
This is a question I wanted to ask you. Did you ever have a dog?
Good question.
Okay, so I am an animal, I'm very, very, very much an animal lover kind of guy. And I just want you to know that I've been one of the most sort of engaged senators in protecting animals. So everything from the Humane Society and I are doing a lot of work together. So everything from protecting endangered species to even, I changed this law, I got into a big bill that when animals were having chemicals tested on them by scientists, I passed legislation that said you cannot do that if there are other responsible methods, and it's probably saved millions of animal lives, including some very cute bunnies I hear. What do you call, by the way, 100 bunnies in a row going backwards? A receding hairline. I'm sorry. I've got lots of jokes that are made for you and not the rest of the people here. Like, why did Tigger and Eeyore have their heads in the toilet? Because they were looking for poo. I'm sorry, man, you're the only guy in here that gets me. It feels me, man. You can tell a lot by society and how it treats its elderly, how it treats its children, how it treats those who are incarcerated, how it treats those beautiful people that have disabilities, and you can tell a lot about society by how it treats its animals. So, I love dogs, man, and this is my problem, and you can help me solve this problem. I lived between two cities for a long time, and having a dog was it's a very hard thing. So I grew up, I had a dog when I came into this world, but I don't have a dog now, and I'm trying to figure out how do I do it on the campaign trail. But I'll tell you what, can you remember this conversation? One of my staff members can take this conversation. If I should become President of the United States, would you help me get a dog?
Yay!
How to get around that challenge. I'm going to conclude, first of all, with making 2 points. And the first is the thank you to this group of folks on the stage. I was a local leader, and it is the busiest job. It is the hardest job, being a city council person. These guys go to the supermarket, which should normally take them 10 minutes. And they are there for they know what I'm talking about. You're there for an hour and a half. You get stuck in the cereal aisle, and you can't move because you're there for people and you're trying to help folks out. And they gave up one of their nights to come here with me and allow us to have this forum. And would you please give them one round of applause? This is the final point I wanted to make. So I obviously want to win an election, but that's not why I'm running for president. Because I'm more interested in the larger campaign for our country. I really do believe we're at a crossroads right now, where our politics could descend into a dark place, and where we are beginning to think the way you succeed is how well you can tear somebody else apart and tear somebody down. And we've lost that grace that you find when you can see somebody who votes differently than you. It's a campaign for our country, one that started centuries ago by black folk and white folk, by men and women, by people of all faiths who saw this country and saw the bare bones of it and said, this is good. It ain't perfect, but we're going to take responsibility and make it better, a more perfect union. And we're not going to underestimate our power, we're going to do something about it. And so, in that theme that seemed to get a lot of people's attention, you know, my goal is to run a campaign to bring people together to solve our problems. Please understand that unity part is really important. But if you walk away with one thing, I hope you don't walk away thinking about me, I want you to think about yourself. I told you this story about a lawyer on a couch changing my destiny, but I want to give you a more recent story. When my tenant president in the projects where I live, I still live in that neighborhood, her son was murdered, she stayed in those buildings because she taught me, as I've said to you already, that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so my more recent example is everybody in this room is what is hope? Since we have had the last election in 2016, this has been two of the most hopeful years of my life. Ooh, this is controversial, let me explain. Because if hope is the active conviction that despair won't have the last word, then what has been blowing me away is people that have not been giving up. People who have taken what happened, which you can't often control how bad things are going to get, bad stuff happens, and they respond to it by saying, I am not going to give up, I'm going to fight. On that inaugural address, when I had to stand up on that stage, and I was hoping for a speech that might be like lofty, like malice towards none, charity towards all, it turned out there was a whole lot of malice and very little charity in that inaugural address. American carnage. In fact, as George Bush and Bill Clinton were walked out, this is reported, forgive me, my man, but this is a presidential quote, so I'm allowed to curse if it was the president that said it. George Bush turns to Bill Clinton and just simply says, that was some strange shit. I told you I'm a data guy and a tactician. I go home that night and I'm like, I'm worried. I'm hurting. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, healthcare. They're going to strip it away. They've said they're going to strip it away. I started going through all the things that they said they were going to do. Because if somebody tells you what they're going to do, you got to believe them, right? I curl up in the bed that night with a headache, holding on. But the next morning, people of hope, whole bunch of women from coast to coast came out and said, Cory, this is not a time to curl up, to shut up, or to give up. It's the time to speak up, to rise up, and get up out of that bed. When they did the Muslim ban, I go to the airport to help to give, to be a lawyer for people that were being detained and fight to get them lawyers. I rush in there and I get stopped in my tracks because there's people from all over the region in Dulles Airport with me chanting. As Muslim families came off the planes, not even American citizens, people broke out to chants like Abraham welcoming strangers in the desert. They were cheering. People in yarmulkes and sitzas cheering Muslims coming off of the plane. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen in my country. I go back to the Senate floor and I tell Joe Donnelly the same thing from Indiana. He goes, Cory, same thing happened to me. I was at the Indianapolis airport, people coming off the plane, we were hugging them and laughing and saying we're Americans, but there were no international flights. It was just a bunch of people hugging folks from Detroit flying in. We are Americans. We are a nation of love, not a nation of hate. We are a nation of decency and kindness. We're a nation of civic grace. We're a nation that sees each other and loves each other and works together. And so I want to win the next election, and I believe we will. I want to bring the best policy ideas. I believe our party will, but I want to heal this nation with you. I want to bring folk back together with you. I want to call to the common decency of a nation and have us all stand and work and fight together, because this nation is not yet a place with liberty and justice for all. And every generation has an obligation to honor their ancestors and join the fight to make this nation more fair and more just, to make this nation a more perfect union. Thank you very much.